Welcome to the deep dive. You guys sent us some really interesting stuff this time around about the hollow earth and Agartha.
Really?
We've got like YouTube videos and even some scientific articles you sent over.
Wow.
It seems like you really want to figure out if there's any truth to this whole world within our world idea,
Yeah.
not just like, I don't know, the legends and stuff.
Right.
So,
It's definitely a fascinating concept.
yeah.
It really captures the imagination, even though it seems kind of out there.
For sure. So the first thing on the list you sent is this YouTube video by this Nessie Judge. I think she's a pretty popular YouTuber.
Yeah, I've seen her stuff.
It's all about this place called Agartha, which is like, I don't know, this hidden, super advanced civilization inside the earth or something.
Right.
And one of the things I thought was interesting was how she tied it to Edmund Halley.
Oh, wow.
Like the comet guy.
Yeah. Edmund Halley, that's a good one.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Like, how does that work? How did we get from comets to a hollow earth?
Well, the interesting thing is that even though it sounds crazy, this idea actually comes from some pretty early scientific thinking.
Really?
Yeah. Halley himself actually proposed this hollow earth theory back in the 17th century.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He was a well-respected astronomer, obviously.
Right.
But his theory about the earth being hollow, that actually came from when he was studying the Earth's magnetic fields.
Mm-hmm.
He thought that the way the magnetic fields worked meant that the planet had, like, different layers inside it.
Yeah.
And he even thought there could be suns and life and stuff inside the Earth.
Wow. So this wasn't just like some random idea. A real scientist actually thought this could be a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wild. But then the video, it goes on to talk about Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd,
Okay.
you know, the explorer.
Right.
It talks about how he supposedly found Agartha.
Yeah, that's a classic example of how these theories can get started, even without much evidence.
Totally.
Byrd's diary is real, but nobody really knows if it's authentic or if we should believe what it says.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a he said, she said with the diary.
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, you know, we always like to look at the evidence here in the deep dive.
Absolutely.
And there's a bunch of stuff here about possible ways to get into this hollow earth.
Right.
The video mentions places like Mount Shasta,
Right.
the pyramids of Giza, even a waterfall somewhere in South America.
And that's where it gets interesting because all those places are super fascinating in their own right. But to say that they're all connected to some hidden civilization, that's a big leap.
Yeah.
It's almost like people want to see patterns and connections even if they aren't really there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
These places are all over the world. How could one civilization be underneath all of them?
Yeah, that's like saying there's secret tunnels connecting every city in the world.
It's not quite that simple.
Okay.
But you get the idea.
Right.
Some of these theories say that there's all these tunnels and caverns underground.
Yeah.
And others say it's like energy portals or something.
Okay, see, now that's getting a little too sci-fi for me.
That's...
I mean, even if these entrances were real, is it really possible that they're all connected? What do we actually know about, like, the inside of the Earth?
Well, that's where we need to look at the science.
Right.
And the science is pretty clear that the Earth is solid.
Okay, so like the whole core mantle crust thing we learned about in school.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that model is based on tons of research. We're talking about seismic data, gravity measurements, analysis of the Earth's magnetic field. Like, there's a lot of evidence for it.
Okay.
You'd need to basically rewrite everything we know about physics and geology to make the hollow earth theory work. And there's just no evidence to support that.
So no giant empty space inside the Earth. That's kind of a bummer.
Well,
But speaking of what's down there, the video mentions something about a massive ocean deep inside the Earth.
oh, yeah.
Like an actual ocean under the ground.
So this is where things get really interesting. These researchers at Washington University were doing these seismic surveys,
Yeah.
which basically means they use sound waves to map out what's inside the Earth, right?
Right.
And what they found was this huge reservoir of water way down below the ocean floor.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking about an ocean underneath the ocean?
It's not an ocean like what we usually think of.
Okay.
The water's all trapped inside the rock way down in the Earth's mantle.
Wow.
So you couldn't swim in it or anything.
Okay.
But the fact that it's down there, it completely changes how we think about the planet.
Okay, that's pretty wild. So maybe no hollow earth, but we're still finding amazing stuff down there.
Exactly.
But okay, let's get back to these stories about, like, actual civilizations living inside the earth.
Okay.
Besides Byrd's diary and these supposed entrances, is there anything else people use to back up this theory?
One of the things they point to is ancient myths and legends,
Okay.
especially from indigenous cultures.
Really?
A lot of them have stories about these underground worlds or civilizations. Well, like the Makuksi people in the Amazon.
Okay.
They say their ancestors were from this underground paradise called Akakor,
Ah.
and that they had to leave and come up to the surface because of some disaster.
Wow.
They even have these maps supposedly showing this underground realm.
Really?
Yeah, and you find similar stories in other Native American cultures too, like the
Yeah.
Navajo and the Hopi.
Mm.
They both talk about their ancestors coming from a world underground.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And it's not just in the Americas. Even Tibetan Buddhist traditions talk about this hidden kingdom called Shambhala in the Himalayas.
That's amazing. The stories seem to be everywhere across all these different cultures and
It
places.
really makes you wonder, right?
Yeah, it does. But do you think they were being literal? Like, do you think they were actually describing a real underground world, or could it have been something else?
It's a good question, and it's important to be a little skeptical about these stories.
Okay.
A lot of times, myths and legends are more symbolic. They teach about a culture's values or explain things in nature.
Oh, so they're like metaphors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're so common and that you see similar themes across so many different cultures, it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
like, maybe there's some truth hidden in there somewhere.
A grain of truth. I like
Mhm.
that.
So even if we don't take them literally, these stories could still be telling us something about what our ancestors experienced or what they believed about the earth.
Exactly. I think that's what's so cool about exploring these theories that are a little out there.
Yeah.
They make us look at things in new ways,
Right.
and they help us realize just how much we still don't know about our planet.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Even for something that seems so outlandish, there are all these different things to consider, different perspectives.
Yeah.
It's almost like an old mystery novel or something, trying to put the pieces together.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah, with clues from all these different places and
Yeah.
times.
And we have to figure out which ones are real and which ones are just leading us down a rabbit hole.
Exactly. Totally.
Yeah.
It's like we've got this puzzle,
Yeah.
and half the pieces are missing. And the ones we do have are all from different puzzles.
Yeah. Okay, but speaking of puzzles,
Yeah.
one piece we see over and over with this Hollow Earth stuff is this idea about a whole other civilization living down there,
Right.
the Agarthans.
Yeah.
So who are these Agarthans? What are they all about?
Now we're getting into the realm of pure speculation here.
Okay.
When people talk about Agarthans, the descriptions are all over the place,
Really?
but they're usually portrayed as these peaceful beings that are way ahead of us, technology-wise.
Okay, but are we talking like spaceships and laser beams advanced, or is it something else?
See, that's the thing about these theories. Nobody can really agree. Some people say they've got technology we can't even imagine, while others say they're more about spiritual enlightenment and being connected to the Earth's energy.
So basically, you can decide for yourself what they're like.
Pretty much.
But it is kind of a comforting thought, isn't it? This idea that there's this hidden, peaceful society somewhere out there.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it speaks to this very human desire,
Yeah.
this hope that there's a better world out there somewhere, something more to reality than what we see every day.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Definitely.
But we can't get too carried away with all that just yet.
Right.
One thing I've always found interesting about these Hollow Earth theories
Yeah.
is how they try to use real scientific stuff to back themselves up,
Right.
like the Earth's magnetic field, for example.
Right. They almost try to borrow credibility from science.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to make it seem more believable.
Exactly.
They'll take a little bit of scientific truth
Okay.
and use it to tell a much bigger, wilder story.
Okay, so like how?
For example, they might talk about how the Earth's magnetic field has poles, just like a magnet you might have on your fridge. And since they think the Earth is hollow, they'll say that those poles have to be the entrances.
You mean like giant holes at the North and South poles leading into the Earth?
Exactly. And they love to use those stories from explorers and pilots,
Oh, yeah.
the ones who say they saw weird stuff or magnetic anomalies near the poles.
Like Admiral Byrd's flight into the Hollow Earth?
Exactly. But here's the thing.
Okay.
The Earth's magnetic field is way more complicated than all that. It's not just a simple bar magnet.
Okay.
It's constantly changing, and the poles don't even line up with the geographic poles exactly.
So those supposed doorways, they might not even be at the North and South poles.
Exactly. It'd be like if you buried a treasure and marked the spot on a map.
Right.
But the map kept changing all the time, and so did the landmarks.
Oh.
Good luck finding that treasure.
Right. That's not going to be easy.
Not at all.
But even beyond the poles, we hear about all these other supposed entrances,
Right.
usually tied to these ancient sites and mysterious places.
Yeah. It's all about the mystery, isn't it?
Right. It's like, what if those ancient civilizations were in on it, you know?
Exactly.
What if they knew about this hidden world and those places are the key to getting there?
It definitely gets the imagination
It
going.
really does.
But again, we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
Okay.
Just because a place is old or mysterious doesn't automatically mean it's connected to the Hollow Earth.
Right, right.
We have to separate what's exciting to think about from what the evidence actually tells us.
So how do we do that? How do we look at these ideas with a more skeptical, grounded mindset?
I think it starts with admitting that we don't have all the answers.
Hmm.
Like, we still don't know everything about those ancient civilizations, for example.
Right.
But just because we haven't figured something out yet
Yeah.
doesn't mean the answer has to be aliens or a hidden civilization, right?
Like saying, I don't understand this, so it must be magic.
Exactly. Yeah. It's great to be curious and ask questions, but we can't just fill in the blanks with whatever sounds coolest.
Right, right.
We need to be open-minded,
Okay.
but also realistic.
Right. I like that.
Open-minded, but skeptical.
Okay, so speaking of skepticism, one thing that's always bugged me
Yeah.
is how come we haven't actually found any proof of this hollow earth?
Right.
Like, if this Agarthan civilization is so advanced and they've been around for so long,
Yeah.
shouldn't we have found something by now? Some real concrete evidence?
You'd think so, right? That's the million-dollar question.
Oh, great.
It's one of the biggest problems for this whole Hollow Earth idea.
Okay.
I mean, we find stuff from civilizations that are thousands of years old all the time.
Right, like tools and pottery and stuff.
Exactly. But when it comes to the Agarthans, there's nothing.
So how do people explain that?
Well, there are a few things they say.
Okay.
One is that the Agarthans are hiding from us on purpose.
Oh, right, the whole they're keeping it a secret thing?
Exactly. They say the Agarthans are either afraid of us,
Okay.
like they think we're too destructive or something,
Right.
or they're waiting for us to evolve a bit more spiritually and technologically
Uh,
before they're ready to say hi.
so we're not enlightened enough to hang out with them yet.
Basically.
Got it.
And then there's the classic conspiracy theory angle
Which is?
that governments and secret organizations, they know all about the Agarthans,
Okay.
but they're hiding the truth from everyone else.
There's always a conspiracy, isn't there?
Always.
But come on, if this was really happening,
Yeah.
you'd think someone would have talked by now, right?
You'd think so, but that's the thing about conspiracy theories.
What's that?
When there's no evidence, they say it's just more proof of the conspiracy.
Say like, you can't win.
Exactly. You can't argue with that kind of logic.
It's like we're going in circles here. But okay, before we give up on this whole hollow earth thing completely, let's talk about some of the things people use as proof. One that always comes up is the idea of polar anomalies.
You mean those weird blurry spots you see in pictures of the North and South Poles?
Exactly. I've seen those, and they definitely look a little off.
Right.
And of course, the Hollow Earth people, they love to point to those. They're always saying it's proof of giant holes leading into the Earth.
Right, and that the government is covering it all up.
Of course.
Whoa.
But what's the real story? Are those really portals to some hidden world?
Probably not. You see the way they make those satellite images of the poles?
Yeah.
They have to piece together a bunch of different pictures.
Oh, so it's like when you take a panorama on your phone.
Exactly. And just like with those panoramas, sometimes things don't line up perfectly,
Right.
especially when you're dealing with huge areas covered in ice.
Okay, so those blurry spots, they aren't actually holes. They're just glitches in the pictures.
Exactly. Plus, there are all sorts of other things that can mess up those images.
Like what?
Well, the weather, for
Yeah,
one,
okay.
like clouds or snow. Even the way the sun is shining can make a difference.
So no need to pack your bags for Agartha just yet.
Not quite.
But, you know, even knowing all that, I still kind of want to believe there's something more to those pictures.
I get it.
Like, what if we just haven't figured it out yet?
It's that human nature again, always looking for patterns and explanations.
Right. But you're right. We can't get too carried away.
Exactly.
We have to balance that sense of wonder with, you know, actually looking at the evidence.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about myths and theories.
We have.
But what about the actual science?
Right, right.
What do we actually know about what's going on under our feet?
Okay, let's put on our scientist hats for a minute and look at what we know about the Earth's insides.
Okay.
Like we said before, all the evidence points to a solid Earth model.
Okay.
It's basically a bunch of layers, each one with its own special stuff in it.
Okay.
Right in the center, we've got the inner core,
Right.
a giant ball of iron and nickel.
So the center of our planet is just a giant metal ball. How big are we talking here?
It's huge, about 3/4 the size of the moon.
Wow. That's way bigger than I pictured.
It's also incredibly dense.
Okay.
And get this, the temperature down there is about 5,200 degrees Celsius.
5,000. Wait, that's hotter than the surface of the sun.
It is. Hotter than the surface of the sun.
Wow. How is that even possible?
It's because of the incredible pressure down there.
Okay.
Millions of times higher than at the surface.
Wow.
That's what keeps the inner core solid, even though it should be liquid at that temperature.
It's mind-blowing to think about what's happening that far down.
It really is.
So what about the next layer, the one around the inner core?
That's the outer core,
Okay.
and this is where it gets cool. It's actually liquid.
Wait, liquid? So the Earth has a liquid metal layer.
It does. It's still mostly iron and nickel,
Okay.
but it's liquid, and it's constantly moving.
Hmm.
And all that liquid metal sloshing around, that's what creates the Earth's magnetic field.
Wait, seriously. So the Earth is like a giant magnet.
Pretty much. It's like a giant dynamo.
Oh, okay.
The outer core spins and churns because of the Earth's rotation and the heat from the inner core.
Okay.
And that movement creates these electrical currents. And those currents create the magnetic field.
Wow. So it's not just a hot metal ball, it's a giant electromagnet protecting us from space.
Exactly. That magnetic field is super important.
Right.
It protects us from dangerous radiation from the sun.
Oh, right.
And it keeps our atmosphere from getting blown away by solar wind.
So even though it's so deep down, it really affects everything up here on the surface.
It does. It's all connected.
Wow.
But we're not done with our journey yet. There's still more to see.
Ooh. Okay. What's next?
The next layer up is the mantle.
Right, the mantle.
And this one is massive.
Okay.
It makes up most of the Earth's volume, about 84%.
84%. So the Earth is basically a giant mantle with a metal center and a thin crust on top.
Pretty much. Even though it's mostly solid rock.
Okay.
The mantle itself is always moving and changing, just really slowly.
Really? I always pictured it as just, solid rock all the way through.
It's not as simple as that.
Okay.
It's divided into two parts, the upper mantle and the lower mantle. The upper mantle, the part closer to us, that's mostly solid.
Okay.
But over a really, really long time, it acts more like a really thick fluid.
Thick fluid. So like honey.
Exactly. It's flowing, but super slowly.
Ah.
And this is all because of what we call convection currents.
Convection currents, like in the outer core.
We got it. The heat from the core causes these currents in the mantle, too.
So even though it's solid rock, it's still moving around down there.
It is, just very slowly.
Wild. What does that even do?
That movement in the mantle, that's what causes plate tectonics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is responsible for the continents moving, mountains forming, volcanoes, earthquakes, all that.
So the Earth's mantle is like this giant engine that's constantly reshaping the planet.
That's a great way to put it.
It's incredible.
It really is.
Okay, but we can't forget about the part we live on.
Right, the crust.
Compared to everything else we've talked about, it seems kind of puny, honestly.
It is pretty thin compared to the mantle and core.
What can you tell us about the crust, scientifically speaking?
Well, for starters, it's not just one big solid shell.
Oh, right. The tectonic plates.
You got it. The crust is broken up into these massive plates that fit together like puzzle pieces.
And they're the ones that cause earthquakes and stuff, right?
Exactly. And they're not just sitting still.
Really?
They're constantly moving, too, just super slowly.
Wow, everything's moving. What makes them move?
You guessed it. Those convection currents in the mantle again.
No way. Those things are responsible for everything.
They really drive a lot of what happens on Earth, both on the surface and deep down.
So, like, when two plates crash into each other, that's how we get mountains and stuff.
Exactly. When two plates collide, they can buckle and fold, pushing up huge mountain ranges like the Himalayas.
No way.
It's true. Or one plate can slide under another one, and that can cause volcanoes to form, or those really deep parts of the ocean.
It's incredible how much is going on beneath us all the time.
I know. It really makes you appreciate how dynamic the Earth really is.
For sure.
It's not just a static, unchanging thing.
Right.
It's alive, constantly evolving and changing over millions and billions of years.
It really makes you realize that we don't need hidden civilizations to have a fascinating world. Even just what's right under our feet is amazing enough.
I completely agree.
Okay, so we've been talking about the Earth's crust as this solid layer, but obviously that's not totally true.
How so?
Well, I mean, we have caves, right? Big holes in the ground? How do those fit in?
Ah, that's a great point. You're right, the Earth's crust isn't perfectly solid.
Right.
It's full of cracks and holes and all sorts of underground spaces.
So how do they form?
Caves are usually formed by water-dissolving rock over a really, really long time.
Oh, wow. So even something as simple as water can create these massive underground spaces.
Exactly. And some caves are truly enormous, with tunnels that stretch for miles.
It makes you wonder if those kinds of places are what inspired those myths and legends about underground worlds.
I've definitely thought about that.
Imagine being one of the first humans to stumble upon a huge cave system.
Right.
It would be easy to think it was some kind of magical or supernatural place.
Definitely.
It's like suddenly those ancient stories about journeys to the center of the earth don't seem quite so far-fetched.
Exactly. They might have been inspired by real explorations, just not of a whole hollow Earth.
That's such a cool thought.
It really is.
So even though caves don't lead to Agartha or anything, they're still pretty amazing.
Absolutely. They remind us of how powerful nature is and how much beauty is hidden beneath the surface.
Okay, so we haven't found any actual cities underground or anything like that.
Not yet, at least.
Right. But we have learned a lot about how the Earth was made and how it's still changing today.
Exactly. And we're still learning new things all the time.
It's really a fascinating story, even without the hidden civilizations. Okay, but let's get back to the Hollow Earth stuff for a bit.
Sounds good. We've talked about the science, but now let's dive back into the theories themselves.
Right, because there are a lot of different ideas about how this whole Hollow Earth thing works.
There really are. It's not just one theory. It's a whole bunch of different ideas all mixed together.
It's like everyone's got their own version.
Exactly. Some people focus on the scientific sounding stuff,
Okay.
while others are more into the spiritual or mystical side of it.
Right.
It makes it both fascinating and really difficult to pin down.
Relax. It's like trying to nail jelly to a wall.
Laughs. That's a great way to put it. But I think that's part of what makes it so appealing to some people.
How so?
Because it's so open-ended.
Okay.
People can kind of pick and choose what they want to believe
Right.
and fill in the blanks with their own ideas.
So where do we even start? What are some of the most common things we see in these Hollow Earth theories?
But one of the biggest ones is this idea that there's a whole other civilization living inside the Earth.
Right. The Agarthans.
Exactly. And they're usually described as being more advanced than us, both technologically and spiritually.
But where did that idea come from?
The idea of people living underground has been around for centuries.
Really?
Oh yeah, you see it in myths and legends all over the world.
Right, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. But the modern idea of Agartha, that comes from a bunch of different places.
Like what?
Well, part of it comes from these writers in the 1800s.
Okay.
They were into occultism and esoteric stuff.
Occultism, huh? So we're talking about like magic and supernatural stuff now.
Kind of. These folks believed that the Earth wasn't just hollow, but that it was a way to get to other dimensions and realms.
Okay, now it's really starting to sound like a fantasy novel.
Laughs. Right. So for a lot of these Hollow Earth believers,
Yeah.
it's not just about a physical space inside the Earth.
Okay.
It's about what it represents.
What do you mean?
Like it could be a symbol of hidden knowledge, or a higher state of being, or even a connection to aliens.
So it's like a choose your own adventure for the spiritual crowd.
You could say that.
Laughs. Okay, so we've talked about civilizations and other dimensions and all sorts of wild stuff.
We have.
But let's go back to that magnetic field thing for a second.
Okay.
What do you make of how the Hollow Earth people try to connect their ideas to real science like that?
It's tricky because the Earth's magnetic field is a real thing, and it's super interesting.
Right.
But the way they explain it often doesn't really line up with what we know from science.
So like they take a little bit of truth and then kind of exaggerate it.
Exactly. For example, they might say that the magnetic field changes over time because there's a hidden sun inside the Earth,
Oh, wow.
and that sun is moving around or something.
But that's not really how it works, is it?
Not at all. They're taking a real phenomenon, the changing magnetic field, and making up an explanation that sounds scientific, but isn't actually supported by any evidence.
It's like they're trying to trick people into thinking it's more believable than it really is.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be able to tell the difference between real science and pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience, that's a good word for it.
It's basically when people dress up their ideas to look like science, but they don't actually follow the rules of scientific evidence.
Right, right.
It's about being a savvy consumer of information, you know.
Yeah.
especially when it comes to these really out there claims.
I like that, savvy consumer of information,
Uh,
because it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of it all and forget to ask the hard questions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we wrap up this whole Hollow Earth deep dive,
Yeah?
there's one more thing I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
And it's something that's super important, especially these days, with so much misinformation and conspiracy theories flying around.
What's that?
Well, it's about critical thinking.
Right.
It's great to be open-minded and all that, but we also have to be careful not to start believing everything we hear.
I completely agree.
Just because something sounds cool or exciting doesn't mean it's true. We have to be able to think for ourselves and question what we're told.
Especially since it's so easy to spread information online, whether it's true or not.
Exactly. Anyone can say anything on the internet.
Exactly.
So we have to be extra careful about what we believe.
Absolutely.
And I think this whole Hollow Earth thing is a perfect example of that.
How so?
Well, we started with this really interesting idea,
Right.
this mystery to solve.
Right. We explored the evidence, we looked at different explanations, and we tried to figure out what made sense and what didn't.
Exactly. And even though we didn't find any proof of a hollow Earth,
Right.
I think we learned something really important about how to think critically.
Right. That's something that's useful in all parts of life, not just when we're talking about the Hollow Earth.
Exactly. It's about being curious, but also skeptical.
Exactly.
Being open to new ideas, but also demanding evidence.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. Well, I think it's time for us to come back up to the surface from this deep dive. Back to reality. Right. But before we go, I think it's important to acknowledge that even with everything we've talked about,
Yeah.
some people will always want to believe in the Hollow Earth.
It's true. And you know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't hurt anyone or stop them from living their lives.
Right. It's good to be curious and ask questions.
Absolutely. A little mystery can be a good thing.
I completely agree.
Who knows? Maybe someday we'll find something that completely changes how we see the world.
That would be amazing. But until then, we'll keep exploring and asking questions.
That's what it's all about.
You know, it's funny. We've gone through all this stuff about the Hollow Earth, all the science and everything.
Right.
And there's still a part of me that kind of wants to believe it.
I get it. There's just something about these mysteries.
I know, right?
The ones that make you think about what's really possible.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what if it's real?
That what if is so powerful.
It really
It
is.
makes you feel like a kid again.
Right. Like we all secretly want to believe in magic or something.
Sad.
Totally. Even when we think we're too smart for that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that quote. The universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine.
That's true.
We have to be open to the idea that reality itself is way more amazing than anything we could think up.
For sure. But at the same time, we can't just believe everything.
Right. Exactly. Just because we can imagine something doesn't mean it's actually going to happen.
Right, right.
Or that it's true.
It's like you can be amazed by the universe without throwing logic out the window.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the balance we're always trying to strike.
I like that.
Open to wonder, but grounded in reality.
Yeah. And I think that's a good lesson from all this Hollow Earth stuff.
Absolutely.
We can be interested in these wild ideas,
Of course.
but we have to look at them critically.
Exactly.
Ask questions, demand proof.
And be okay with the fact that sometimes those amazing explanations,
Yeah,
they turn out to be wrong.
that's true.
Sometimes the truth is even more amazing than we thought. Yeah. Like all that stuff about the Earth's interior, that was pretty wild.
Right. Molten metal, giant plates moving around. It's incredible.
And it's all real,
It really makes you realize that Earth is a pretty awesome place.
for sure. We don't need hidden civilizations to have a fascinating world.
We really don't.
Yeah.
The more we learn about the Earth and the universe, the more we realize how much we don't know.
I know. It's like every answer just leads to more questions.
Exactly, like peeling back layers of an onion.
And it never ends.
Exactly, and that's an exciting thought, isn't it?
It really is. So maybe no Hollow Earth this time, but we did learn a lot.
We always do.
Yeah.
And who knows what we'll find on the next deep dive.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe next time we'll find something that makes the Hollow Earth look boring.
Laughs. Now that would be something. Until then, stay curious.
And skeptical. Thanks for listening, everybody.